Let me now invite Saloni Goel. She is the head of circular economy and plastic waste management with UNDP India. And she's going to talk about the plastic recycling in India and the recent reforms. But before I invite Saloni to make a presentation, let me take the opportunity to quickly introduce her to all of you. Saloni is a graduate from IIT Delhi and holds a master's degree in environment and development from London School of Economics. Saloni has a vast breadth of experience in policy, consultancy, and project implementation in the spheres of environment, climate change, sanitation, and sustainability. She currently heads circular economy and plastic waste management at work at UNDP. Prior to this, she has also served as climate change specialist with Niti Aayog. She led the sanitation work during Kumbh 2019, the world's largest ever mass gathering of 240 million visitors, delivering an open defecation-free, garbage-free, and odor-free event. She has also worked with United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, on marine litter and plastic pollution, and World Bank-funded UP Health System Strengthening Project, pioneering a smart biomedical waste management system that has been adopted statewide for implementation. She is recipient of many awards, to name a few: Kalam Award for Innovation and Governance and the Times Group Digital India Award. Her work on successful implementation of Swachh Kumbh culminated with the award of the Guinness World Record. So congratulations, Saloni, and welcome to this conclave. Over to you. The presentation is ready.
Good morning, everyone. A pleasure to be here. And congratulations to CSE for organizing this conversation. CSE has a proven track record for rattling the system. So, and I think that rattling is very important from time to time to get us to really think and push us out of our comfort zone. And this certainly is a sector that has not reached a comfort zone. So it needs a lot of pushing and cajoling and questioning before it actually reaches a stage when we can say things are on track. So just very briefly, I'm Saloni Goel, as I've been introduced, and I currently head UNDP's work on circular economy and plastic waste management. And today I'll be talking about plastic recycling reforms, and really with the thought that how these reforms, so while we understand that these reforms are significant, I will also like to share with you that India is one of the leading countries in regulation on plastic waste management, and now exceedingly in other categories of waste management. I was in Bangkok in the first week of November, and several South Asian and Southeast Asian countries have reached out to UNDP for support for figuring out their EPR regulation. So I can comfortably say that we're leading. However, much still needs to be done, and I think all of you, practitioners on the ground, people from research organization, industry bodies, you're also understanding that this is a great and a significant step forward, but there is a lot that needs to be thought through, a lot that needs to come together, a lot of partnerships, collaborations need to come together so that we can actually see the impact, certainly from the point of view at least of minimizing the environmental impact of plastics, enhancing resource recovery, because increasingly the world is understanding that resources are scarce and we need to see circularity. And because I'm coming from a UN organization, I also see a very strong developmental angle, which is really about working with the informal communities and not letting this pace of reforms and action crowd out the informal sector from this work. So might one over here. Thank you. So just very briefly to talk about UNDP's plastic waste management program. We work with corporate partners. The program is funded by corporate partners. We have in the course of, since the project inception, we have managed to process almost 1.4 lakh metric tons of plastic waste. And we have also enabled social inclusion of waste pickers, well over almost 11,000 waste pickers, directly as well as indirectly. And if I talk about the current trends in plastic waste recycling, so I'm I know you all know these figures. Somewhere they're floating around, and we are drawing from CPCB data. But just broadly to set the context, we're looking at 1.4 lakh metric tons of waste being generated. Of course, I think in several of these forums, we are questioning these numbers. And I think much still needs to be done to stabilize or to really have these numbers which represent the reality on the ground. I would like to draw your attention to the next number, which is 1 to 4 million waste workers are working in an informal way in this sector. And I think it is indicative when we say we have 1 to 4 million waste workers. So it also gives us a sense that really the data and action about integrating waste workers into this whole process is really so patchy. I mean, we're looking from 1 to 4 million, it's 4-time variation or a 4-time range in the enumeration of waste workers. So it is, according to CPCB data, 90% of the waste is getting collected. Only the balance is reaching landfills. About 1/4 of the collected waste is getting processed. Majority of the work is in the recycling sector is happening in the informal sector. Specifically with respect to plastics, we can say that while plastics or recyclables make up about 30% of the total basket of waste, which is about 15,000 metric tons. And I think this is an optimistic figure when we say that 60% of it is getting processed. But even if we don't go by the number, we understand that the plastic waste or the waste that is not getting processed is invariably leaking into the marine environment. It is clogging our terrestrial water bodies. It is causing soil pollution. It is landing in landfills, burdening landfills. It is also incentivizing manual scavenging. Now, I'm talking about a few ground level challenges which are emerging from our on ground work, UNDP's on ground work, and I'm sure the list can be much longer, and each of you could contribute to this list based on your experience and your work in this sector. So, of course, the bottom line, and I think the ministry has also raised this. The other speakers have also from the ministry have raised this. Somewhere the action or the ownership for this work will have to lie with societies, with communities. They need to understand. However, I think we also need to strengthen enablers to make the society and communities understand and participate in a responsible way for waste segregation. So when we say better labeling mechanisms, we need to say greater literacy. We also need to be using simple to understand evidence. So really between science and society, a role that IPCC is playing, how do we communicate complex scientific knowledge and evidence to the common man to let them know that this is what your action is resulting in? I think that gap needs to be bridged between science and policymakers and science and communities. And I think that's one of the challenges that still besets this sector. We have material recovery facilities, but we have the number of material recovery facilities or dry waste collection centers or whatever we may call them, they are very few and far between. So the physical infrastructure is very inadequate. Sometimes it is concentrated in certain pockets. I think we need to expand the physical infrastructure for waste management, for waste collection, sorting, segregation. We need to expand it multiple fold. Plastic recycling infrastructure, another big gap, and I'll talk about it in a subsequent slide. Informality of Safai Sathis, our concern is that as long as they remain in the informal space, it limits their access to incomes, assured incomes, safe working environments, as well as access to social benefit programs. And then, of course, we have this large elephant in the room. What do we do with the low value and non-recyclable plastics? How do we drive the value chain of low value and non-recyclable plastics? How do we make that demand driven? So just to make my point out here, as you can see, the first horizontal bar that signifies PET, and you can see the majority of PET is actually landing in the recycling sector. So now the percentages we could argue, whether it is 90%, whether it is 95%, 80%, 60%. But the point is an overwhelming chunk of PET is reaching the recycling sector. And that is largely because we have takers of recycled PET. In fact, now that market is heating up and it's actually causing the prices of recycled PET up. On the other hand, we have wastes like PP and LDP, which are not getting driven by the demand or by the market. And I think that's where we are concerned. And that's where we need to, so that is one of the areas, let me say, which needs concerted action. When I talk about the recycling ecosystem, a majority of the recycling ecosystem, and Pranshu and I were just talking about it before in the tea break, is concentrated in the western part of the country, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, which leaves a substantial chunk of the country as a black spot for recycling. So there is very little incentive for collecting waste, segregated waste, and even if the waste gets collected, how do we ensure its viability, its recycling viability, if the transport cost is humongous? Another area of action. And it's interesting how this maps onto the collection or the recycling efficiency. So you can see the first bar is Ahmedabad. So because Ahmedabad is situated in the western part of the country, you can see the overwhelming majority of PET is getting recycled in Ahmedabad. In Delhi, where the recycling infrastructure exists, but it is not adequate, only a part of PET is actually landing into the recycling framework. And a city like Bengaluru, where we still have a lot of work that has been done, but because of the inadequacy of the recycling infrastructure, a very small chunk by comparison of PET is getting recycled in Bangalore. So coming to the regulatory reforms, we've had a whole pile of them coming from 1999, but just bringing to attention, we had most recently the EPR framework coming out on 16th of April 2022, and we had the single-use plastic ban from the 1st of July 2022. Again, repeating that these are significant regulatory regulations. India is a leader in this matter in geographies, similar geographies. However, I would like to talk about what these regulations are doing, or what we need to watch out for, and how we need to take, what we need to do to take the effective implementation, or I would say ensuring that we actually get the outcomes and the fulfillment of these regulations, what all we collectively, as people who are working in this space, even regulators, need to think about in order to strengthen the impact or the outcome. So I think we are all understanding, and also drawing from my previous statements, that an investment in physical infrastructure, whether it is collection, segregation, and transportation, how to make EPR a driver of that. Without adequate physical infrastructure, there is the percentage or the quantity of waste that will actually reach a recycler we will not be able to see the required jump without the necessary physical infrastructure. But is the EPR framework incentivizing creation of the physical infrastructure? Urban local bodies, they are working in isolation, while they are a very critical and a substantial link in the entire waste value chain, but currently they're working in isolation. Now, will the EPR infrastructure further heighten their isolation, or will it accelerate their integration? Another point of discussion. The other thing, again, we were discussing that right now, because EPR is a market-based polluter pays principle, the general understanding of all stakeholders right now is अब बहुत पैसा आ रहा है EPR की वजह से स्पेस में. But really क्या बहुत पैसा आ रहा है? Is that cake growing, or is the cake shrinking? And are the takers or the partakers from that cake, are they growing or are they shrinking? And how are the benefits, the revenue benefits that are supposed to be accruing from a robust EPR implementation? Can we rely on the market alone to ensure equitable, efficient, and desirable benefit sharing? And each of these words is significant: equitable, efficient, and desirable benefit sharing across all stakeholders. How will the EPR certificates, the price of EPR certificates, will they be adequate incentive to incentivize segregation of low value and non-recyclable plastics? Again, a matter to be considered, debated, deliberated. We don't don't have answers right now. I don't have the answer out here. And I think such forum and CSE's leadership in this matter will be very crucial to really bring together a diverse set of stakeholders to really sit down, talk, and thrash these issues out. Are the EPR certificates really an adequate reflection of the physical flow of material? And how can they become an adequate, how can they adequately reflect the physical flow of material? Will it just be a paper, or will it actually be a reflection of the material that is actually flowing through the value chain? Then, of course, a subject that is close to our heart is barriers to formalization of the sector. There are real barriers to formalization of the sector, and those barriers are not just literacy. They are not just financial inclusion. They are not just access to social benefit programs. They are not just the social status of the informal, of the overwhelming majority of informal waste pickers. But will the EPR, or will these regulations, will they be able to, even as indirect drivers, will they be able to work quickly and sufficiently enough so that the informal sector is formalized and not deprived or actually crowded out of this whole space? So I would just like to refer to a study that UNDP did as a part of our COVID relief work. We did a very comprehensive baseline socioeconomic assessment of Safai Sathis. We went to 15 cities, covered 9,301 Safai Sathis, and we were trying to assess that really what is their status with respect to their documentation, their socioeconomic strata, their access to government benefit programs. So I know we all intuitively understand that these are gaps, but we wanted to generate adequate evidence to be able to make a point at necessary platforms and with policymakers. So there was it's a comprehensive report. I'll be happy to share the link with you. You can also go to the UNDP site to access this report. But I would just like to share a couple of, I would say, insights that we also gained in the process. So we found that almost 70% of the Safai Sathis are coming from socially disadvantaged groups. Almost half Safai Sathis, they don't have access, or they don't have the national documents. Now, those documents are enabling documents which will give them access to government benefits programs. They don't have the necessary documents. Even if they had them, the quality of documentation is poor. Even if they got them in the first hand, they've lost them, obviously because of the places that they live in, the environment in which they live, and which is a cause for concern. Only one third of them do not even know how to get access to ration cards. We found that almost 70% Safai Sathis are still working in the informal sector. 70% are getting wages less than 10,000. We found that an overwhelming majority of Safai Sathis have no linkage to health benefits. We also found that 50% of them, almost half of their Safai Sathis children, do not have access to schools because of financial constraints. Now, basis this learning, UNDP is now currently implementing what we call Project Uthan, whereby we're actually ensuring that Safai Sathis either directly linked with our material recovery facilities or working in the larger waste ecosystem. Not only are they ensured the necessary documentation, but also they have access, or they have linkages with at least 2 government benefit programs. We're calling it Project Uthan. We're currently working with 3,000 Safai Sathis spread across Delhi and Mumbai, but now we're escalating it to 20,000 going forward. Yeah. Okay. Also, we've talked about biodegradable plastics, and we understand that while we've talked about biodegradable plastics, while we also understand the importance of biodegradable plastics, but how will we ensure that biodegradable plastics don't get disposed of, mixed with non-biodegradable plastics? And therefore, because any contamination of biodegradable plastics in the recyclable plastic waste stream means that recycling becomes impossible to carry forward. One of the things that will have to come up for discussion will be labeling, how to standardize it, how to make it simple, recognizable, and noticeable. And of course, while we're talking about bans, we understand that bans will only be effective if we have developed alternatives. But I would also like to share alternatives that are cost competitive, as well as use alternatives. And I think that is a critical part of development of alternatives. And I think finally, and very, very significantly, how is the government going to be working to strengthen their regulatory capacity, how to make it sufficient, and very importantly, agile to keep pace with the market movements. Last slide, just to let you know, our work on plastic waste management impacts 14 out of the 17 SDGs that UNDP is promoting and working on. And thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Shaloni. That was really insightful, and I hope you are staying with us to join the panel later in the day. I have noticed that Swati has reached among us, but I'll give you a few more minutes to get your breath back because you are practically running from the morning. So I'll now like to invite our next presenter, Nandini Kumar. So Nandini will talk about India Plastic Pact and what are the producers, importers, brand owners in India doing. Let me also take the opportunity to introduce Nandini to all of you. Nandini works with CII, ITC Center for Excellence for Sustainable Development, where she initiated work in circular economy and resource efficiency and has led this activity for over 4 years now. At the center, the team works at the interface of policy, business, and science with the aim providing data-backed scientific evidence for business and policy decisions. In the India Plastic Pact, a voluntary business-led platform to create a circular economy for plastic packaging, launched on the 3rd of September in the portfolio's most exciting current venture. Under the MOU between CII and Norwegian Institute of Water Research, NIVA, she spent a year in Oslo over 21-22, bringing specific expertise in plastic waste management and voluntary commitments by Indian industry, contributed to Nordic Report 4 on sustainability criteria and global agreement on plastic pollution, and co-led on the India component of the project for multinational company on plastic value chains. Before joining CII, she was a faculty member and researcher at Terry University, New Delhi for over a decade, and was a Fulbright scholar in 2012 in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, USA, pursuing keen interest and belief in systems thinking and the systems dynamics. Nandini has a doctorate in atmospheric chemistry and master degree in environmental chemistry. Welcome, Nandini. Let me just help you to find your presentation and just share it.
Thank you very much for having me here today to talk about the India Plastics Pact. I'll try to make it as quick as possible because there's quite a bit to cover. So the India Plastics Pact was launched last year in August, and it's been developed by CII together with WWF, and it's supported by RAP. The vision of the India Plastics Pact is a world where plastic is valued and doesn't pollute the environment. And I think there's a huge lesson, if you can call it that, hanging from the phrase where plastic is valued. In one way or another, everybody has been addressing this point, the point about recycling. So if you imbue plastic with a value, it will be picked up. That's the philosophy or the concept on which the plastics pacts are based. There are 12 plastics pacts operating throughout the world. The one in India is the 13th, and this is the first pact in Asia. So some features of the India Plastics Pact, and some of these will be common to the other pacts also. The first is it deals only with plastic packaging. We're not talking of plastic products at all. So as you might imagine, it's largely the FMCG companies who get targeted for this. It's a voluntary agreement entirely with business at the core. Also, it works outside environmental compliance, but supports it. There's no point having a separate agreement which companies sign on to, which is, going off in a different direction to compliance. It just doesn't make any sense. So it's a platform for the whole value chain to collaborate on. And here's where I think the differentiator, the largest differentiator lies. It's not focused only on the post-consumer part of the value chain, but targets everyone, starting with resin manufacturers to converters, brands, the consumer, post-consumer, collection, segregation, and onto the recycler also. So that's a huge, it's a very important part of the pact structure. The other important thing is that this is not focused on PET, which you'll often find associations in India focused on, which is fine. Everyone has to do their own bit of work. But the point is this covers plastics packaging with irrespective of the resin of which the plastic is made, the packaging is made. It offers companies a good chance to demonstrate the corporate and regional leadership and also to do something about the plastic packaging. The pact does not endorse any individual business or initiative. It is a neutral platform which uses science and data as backing to provide its recommendations or information for the companies to work on. All the pacts in the world subscribe to these 4 targets, and they all have different target years. So for India, the target year is 2030, given the state of development we are in. For other pacts in the world, it might be 2025, 2026, or something like that. Target 1 is defining a list of unnecessary or problematic plastic packaging and taking measures to address that through redesign and innovation. So that's target 1. And what's interesting to note is that normally countries come up with a definition of items here. They name items that they will get rid of or that they will phase out. So things like plastic straws or balloons or single-use items appear in this list in other pacts. But in India, because the government has come up with such a strict mandate on SUP, those were already part of the company's commitments. So we had to go beyond that. And therefore, the list we've come up with now is what we call the ambition list, because it goes beyond those 18 items on the GOI's list. Target 2 says 100% of packaging produced by the companies who sign on to the pact has to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. So most countries have a 100% target for this. In fact, all the other pacts have a 100% target for this, and so does India. This target was, the ambition was arrived at via a consultation process with companies in India. So this is something in the Indian context designed for India by Indian companies. Target 3 says that 50% of plastic packaging should be effectively recycled. So it's not just a matter of designing it to be recyclable, but it also must be effectively recycled. And the word effectively over here takes into account the scale. It should be on scale and in practice, which means that this target actually involves people beyond the companies. It involves exactly the portion of the plastics life cycle that Saloni referred to in such detail. Without an adequate collection, sorting, segregation, aggregation mechanism, this target can't be achieved. So this galvanizes that part of the plastics value chain. Target 4 pulls the rest of the targets because it mandates a 25% average recycled content across all plastic packaging. Now for India, there is a huge problem in achieving these targets considering where we are right now. But it is my belief that without having an ambitious target, you can't move anywhere. So you need to make it really ambitious. What makes this particularly difficult, and again, this is something all of you will be familiar with, is the fact that rigid packaging formats dominate in India, do not dominate in India. Sorry. It's the flexible format that dominates. And the flexible format is very, very difficult to recycle. It's very difficult to collect in a sufficient quantity that provides a waste worker an income that is enough for a day or a week even. And then, like many people have pointed out before me, where to store it. It's just not viable. So flexible packaging has a whole string of problems attached to it. Here are some members of the India Plastics Pact, companies who've signed on. They pay a subscription, a yearly subscription, which supports the secretariat which CII holds right now. And you'll find people from across the value chain on this diagram. It's on the India Plastics Pact website in case you're interested in seeing that in more detail. In order to codify and encapsulate the activities that are envisaged to 2030, we have come out with a roadmap that was released in August, again available on the website. The roadmap contains the expected outcomes together with a timeline and a list of which stakeholders would be responsible. So everything revolves actually around those 4 targets you saw in those 4 squares a little while ago. The roadmap will tell you what kinds of things we need to do to achieve those 4 targets from now all the way to 2030. It's meant to be a dynamic document because policy changes, international changes, etc., may necessitate some changes in how you will achieve a certain target. So it's a guiding document which everyone can use and refer to. We've also brought out some technical reports. These, in fact, the launch program is tomorrow. The first is a material flow of PET used in packing applications. And this begins with starting with import data picked up from the Ministry of Commerce's website, going by the HSN codes. We start from there, track it all the way through to the different applications PET is used in up to the end of life. So this gives you an idea of how much waste is generated, gives you a good idea of what you can expect to see in the waste stream after a certain number of months, years, etc. That part hasn't yet been mapped out, by the way, yet. The second report we have brought out is business opportunities, for food grade rPET in India. This is to incentivize the largest number of PET recyclers today who mostly convert PET into fiber and not into food grade PET, which is the highest value, the bottle to bottle recycling. Of course, the FSSAI permitted that only in January this year, so there was a legal restriction on it. But the point is, what are the advantages a recycler can gain from using the best technology to do food to food or bottle to bottle recycling or the highest grade possible? That's what this document outlines. It's very short, but we thought it would be useful. We're also coming out with a design guidance for rPET food grade bottles since the regulation is now in place. This tells you about PET bottles, the specific components of the bottle, starting with the adhesives used, the printing ink used, the cover of the bottle, the lid closure, the label, the size of the bottle, etc., covers all aspects and tells you, starting from the informal sector worker, from there up to the recycler, what is it that you can do in the design of the bottle to facilitate, encourage its picking up, its collection, sorting, segregation, and then what the recycler finds problematic in his machines is also addressed in this design guidance. So that's one thing that's going to be out. The landscape of small formats and sachets packaging. Is there time left? How much?
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes.
Okay. So the small formats, as we are all aware, are the trickiest part of packaging in India and in many other countries in the world which have a similar socioeconomic kind of distribution. The point is these formats are affordable, they make products accessible, and they're really important in many ways. But in many ways, they are not important. How can the design of these be altered? Is it possible to look at the distribution of applications in this and see where the maximum waste gets generated due to packaging in food applications or non-food applications? Where is it possible to gain the maximum advantage in via an intervention? Where can a design be brought about? So the Plastics Pact is working simultaneously on upstream portions, that is the design-based portions for different kinds of packaging. This report will be out in March. We've begun work on it. The informal sector insights paper works on many of the areas that Saloni has been outlining and that other speakers mentioned earlier on in the day. What is it that the informal sector worker finds problematic while picking up items from the road? Mostly it's to do with the weight of the package. It has to be enough to provide him an income that is sufficient for that day. And where will he store it? Milk packets are a great example because they are eminently recyclable. But picking them up is a huge, huge problem. Of course, there's the odor issues and all that also, but it's just a common example. So we hope to use insights from the informal sector, who we interview and survey to come to the conclusions we've picked up here. And we talk to recyclers and brands and try to connect all those threads together in coming out with these reports. A couple of videos, one on the India Plastics Pact and EPR, exactly where the two meet each other, where do they converge, how does one help the other, or rather does IPP help EPR? There's one called Voices from the Waste, which is about plastic waste management and the informal waste sector, and a little video on testimonials from our members. So I'll just take a minute here to connect the two. The correspondence between the EPR targets and the India Plastics Pact targets come like this. So while the EPR sets out the numerical target, it sets out the ambition, it doesn't tell you how to achieve that. That's not the purpose of the regulation anyway. But the pact has, as you would have realized from the references I'm making to the design documents, etc., outlines how exactly those targets can be achieved. So it addresses the how of it. The collection part in EPR corresponds to target 3, which I told you galvanizes the whole ecosystem. Reuse is in target 2. We are examining refill and reuse models very thoroughly with brands who are members, getting funding from external sources to run pilots and try to see how best to address this problem, because it's a great way to substitute for these sachets in small formats if you can get people back into the refill mode. Recycling is part of target 3. Incorporation of recycled content is a very, very tricky area because the flexibles are the format that's used in maximum amount. Incorporating recycled content into flexible packaging is not done anywhere in the world right now at any scale. So we will be working on this very, very hard, and probably commission a report in March. Work on that will begin in March. We've already begun work on a report on incorporating recycled content into rigid packaging. So that's already begun. We're developing a guidance on HDPE rigids at the moment. The PET one you've seen is already out. And packaging design, as outlined in clause 7.7, I think, it sets out 4 criteria: sustainable design, etc. There are 4 criteria in that. So packaging design is again embodied in target 2 of the pact. Yep, that's about it. Very, very quick run through. Be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Can we have Kaifi to just load up presentation? Swati, is it okay if I call you back to put things back in order? Okay, let me use the other mic while let Kaifi fix your presentation. So let me now introduce our next speaker, Swati Seshadri, who is the team lead for oil and gas in Center for Financial Accountability, and she's going to talk about the much needed invisible link between petrochemicals and plastics. And also let me quickly introduce Swati before I invite her to speak. Swati Seshadri has worked on a range of civil society organizations as a researcher and in leadership role since the late 1990s. She currently works at the Center for Financial Accountability as team lead for oil and gas. The team tracks investment and impact on the plastic value chain from extraction, import, transportation to processing and petrochem production and post-management issues. The petrochem sector has been a particular focus of Swati's work for the past few years. So thank you for taking out time, Sir Swati. Welcome aboard, and the floor is now yours.
First, sorry to be late. The flight had technical issues and we took off 2 hours late. So I'm really sorry to mess up your schedule.
Air India to be blamed.
Yeah, I'm just glad we didn't crash on the way. I'm so happy to see this report because I think it's for the first time I'm seeing that in a plastics document, there's the mention of the word petrochemicals. You don't even find that mention. Usually when we speak to people and ask them how are plastics made, I draw a blank gaze because people really don't know how plastics are really made, so this is really great, and thanks Siddharth for bringing petrochemicals here. It's so important. I'm going to try and be on time, but please remind me if I'm
Sure.
I have a very ambitious presentation here because petrochemical doesn't really find space in plastics. So what are petrochemicals and what is their status today? So I'm going to do a little back and forth. I'm going to do a global scene and then come to India and then look at impacts because I feel like I need to do all of that in the little time that I have. So this is what plastics upstream, midstream and downstream looks like. So good, not too much plastic here, but whatever plastic that you all are seeing has essentially come from either crude oil or gas or natural gas or coal. And it goes through all these different processes until at the bottom where you see the final products. That's how complex plastics are. And plastic is a petrochemical. And I think there is nothing else to say about that. Polyester is a petrochemical, and we're wearing petrochemicals and we're wearing polyester. And therefore, when we looking at post-management issues, when we're looking at how to break it down when it's, reaching its end of the particular use that it's made for, let's not forget how complex it has been to make it, and therefore how complex it would be to do away with it, if at all it can be done. Yeah, so that's petrochemicals, and that's how complex it is, which is why I think I read in the report very quickly that you couldn't get data on PET because PET actually doesn't have certain chemicals which it claims to have, and therefore it's extremely complex set of chemicals that is plastic. Petrochemicals, so there is a global politics of petrochemicals today. It's not as simple as it seems. Also, I would like to stress that all of us think of plastics as a litter issue or something that becomes a problem at the end once we are done using it and we throw it away. But that's not the case. It's an issue from the time it's born, from the time it has been thought of. Plastic was a waste product in oil refining. That's the history of plastic. It was a waste, which then, of course, the profit-making sector said we can't have any waste. We have to capitalize on everything that we make, and therefore we have to capitalize on the waste that oil refining is producing. And so petrochemicals and plastics therefore has a politics around it. And unless we look at the upstream and the midstream, any amount of work that we do on the downstream is not going to be adequate. And I think this work has to work with each other, in collaboration with each other, rather than at cross purposes with each other. So today we are seeing people moving away from oil to electric vehicles, from coal-based power to renewable power, solar and wind, etc. What happens to big oil companies? They're not going to stop existing, nor are they going to stop making the money. What they're going to do is they're going to divert oil as feedstock for petrochemicals and for plastics. And we've got to get prepared and ready for that happening now, because every time we see more investment in the renewable energy sector, we're going to see more investment in the plastic and petrochemical making sector as well. And that is what we're going to have to actually fight. Also, if you look at, for example, Reliance, this is a very popular story now, that as lockdown was announced, the Reliance factory in Jamnagar continued to function. It took them a week to move from refining or processing oil for petroleum to processing oil for all the sanitizers and the PPE kits and everything. It took them a week. That's how technologically advanced our country is. IOCL's pride and joy is that their technology parallels global technology, right? So our oil companies are extremely advanced. They're extremely capable of very quickly shifting from refining oil for petroleum to refining oil for petrochemicals. So this is something we need to absolutely watch out for. So it's a bit of Lookland in Tokyo that's going on. There's EPR and SUP ban on the one hand, and there is India wants to be a petrochemical hub in Asia. We want to be the market leaders in this region. We already have the biggest petrochemical manufacturing facility in Jamnagar in Asia. So it's actually, I wonder what kind of schizoid minds are actually making these kinds of policies which actually don't talk to each other. I'm not repeating what's there. Right now, we are seeing that 14% globally, 14% of crude oil is used for petrochemicals, 8% of natural gas. But what we're anticipating, according to the International Energy Agency, is that between now and 2050, almost 50% will move from being used for transportation to being used for petrochemical, because more and more renewables, more and more electric vehicles, more and more petrochemicals. So that is the shift that the globe is actually anticipating, and we will see why it's worrisome for us. In terms of demand for materials that has grown over the years, the blue one is plastics, and more than any other material over the years, the demand for plastics has gone up. And we know that right now about 19% of chemicals and petrochemicals produced in India is petrochemicals. Okay, so it's I mean petrochemicals for plastic, so it's polymers, and that's the extent also currently that is being produced, and we can imagine how it will be going ahead. Here is just a very complicated way of saying the same thing. If you look at it, nitrogen on top, fertilizers is a big recipient of crude oil, and then next is plastics. Of course, plastics is more than fertilizers in terms of oil being used for plastics versus oil being used for fertilizers. But if we can just take a look at it, there's oil, gas, coal, and secondary food stocks right there at the left. Yeah. And on this side, on the green and the yellow part, you see that it's all going to plastics, right? So that is the kind of diversion of oil to plastics that we see today. This is just to say what the environment impacts are, and we look at real life photos later. This is just some theoretical work. Among plastics, we're seeing packaging is the biggest, not surprising, construction and transportation, so on and so forth. So for example, according to Plastic India Foundation, about 52% of plastics produced is for flexible packaging. Like Nandini just actually mentioned that it's plastic in India. Okay, so where are we headed then? This is where we are headed. So again, IEA did an anticipation of what the plastics industry will look like, and this is where it is constantly growing. And to make plastics, you have to have petrochemicals. So let's not forget, you can't produce plastics without petrochemicals. You're increasing plastics, you're increasing petrochemicals. This is an extremely important slide. So as the northern countries are extracting more and more oil, they're not going to process it there. They have the COP sitting on them, they have UNFCCC sitting on them. Where are they going to send it? If you look at the Asia Pacific figure right at the far right of it, actually the scale is different. You can't see the numbers, but if you ever receive this presentation, you know that the highest in the scale in the Asia Pacific is 600 units, and the highest on the West is 200 units. So all of the crude is, and this is basically the primary feedstock in use to produce chemicals and petrochemicals. So it is the Asia Pacific region which is going to be producing the largest amount of chemicals and petrochemicals on behalf of the entire world. So this will be produced and then exported everywhere, and everyone will use it. It's not like we're doing it for ourselves. I'm sorry to say this, but who's going to hold the shit? It's us and our people who are going to hold the pollution while we are producing on behalf of the rest of the world, right? While they get the clean air, we are going to be dying. This is the kind of investment that we're seeing, anticipating. Even a FICCI report says that until now, 16 billion USD has been spent on the petrochemical industry. There's an anticipated 100 billion coming up. So that's the kind of investment that we are seeing. And if you look at the top and the bottom graph, the top graph is if there was a clean technology scenario, and the bottom graph if it was business as usual. And you look at Asia Pacific, there's very little difference whether it was clean technology or it was business as usual. There is so much of money that's going to get invested. Of course, I mean, the government can say, with pride and joy, that this means jobs, this means development, but really what kind of development? We'll see some gory photos later. Petchem in India, quickly, it's an oligarchical industry, 15 big polymer producers. You have 30,000 MSME, small time people who are producing the plastics. I have not put in the FMCG data here. That's actually pending. 40 lakh workers. So it's a big. This is a sector which is run by the 15 big oil companies in India, and they call the shots. It's not the 30,000 MSME industry which is setting policy for petrochemicals in this country. Yeah. So this is all some data. 85 crude oil refinery projects that are which would account for 52%, are coming up in India. 44 projects are already approval stage, and 22 in construction, and 19 are at the feasibility stage. So this is a reality that's happening. We are going to be one big polluting country. Yeah. So Reliance Industries is the sole producer of LEP in India. So it's a monopoly. It's not even, there's no market challenge to them. And they produce 42% of commodity plastics. Opal, which is in Dahej, is a far second. If you see the graph, you'll know. It's this long line of Reliance, and everyone just falls back very, very badly. These are where the refineries are located. If you look at the green one on the left, very clearly on the coast, so we can guess what's happening onto the coast. All the toxicity is being dumped into the oceans. If our fish workers are being arrested in Pakistan, that's because Gulf of Kutch and Gulf of Khambat is completely polluted. They can't fish over there. They're having to go into deep sea water. And can you look at the linkages? Therefore, it's not just 5 jobs that are created, but you now have people sitting in Pakistan prisons because they can't fish in waters around our country, and they're having to cross the international line, right? This is the petrochemical producing. This is how the whole country is producing petrochemicals at some quantity or the other. So the impacts of the petrochemical industry, these words are all very nice. I'll just take you to some photos. So the bottom right here, the sludgy part is in Dahej. Untreated toxic pollutants, effluents dumped into the sea in the night when no one is looking, right? This is after the cleanup, by the way. That one which rubs and it says green belt, it's a joke. It's actually a road divider which has little shrubs, and that's the green belt of the Dahej petroleum chemical and petrochemical investment region, PCPIRs as they call. That's the green belt that we have set up over there. It's not green, it's black, because there is Adani's coal factory, right up there with all the coal soot and the deposits on the leaves. So they don't even look green. So the green belt is a big joke. More dumping into the sea directly, fish workers affected. This is the state. I mean, I don't have the time to explain, but this is the state in 1985 and 2000. You can see how in 2020, it's all sludge. There is no Narmada River. The river is a joke, right? I mean, apart from the dams that have been built on it and making it swimming pools, now you also have, a pushback in terms of toxicity from the downstream into the upstream of the river. These are little nalas which are going to the sea. So on the one on the left, that side, a cow died drinking that water, right? So it's not just in DuPont, it's not just in Cancer Alley, it's happening here. We just don't want to talk about it. Another place where another cow died drinking this water because, this is Opal. This is not even private sector. This is PSU dumping toxicity. I couldn't take good photos and I wouldn't want to take their faces, but it says my safety starts with me. This is Gujarat. This is Dahej. It says my safety starts with me, but actually a worker's safety starts with the company and not with the person. But again, safety of people is just outsourced to the workers. I'll come to the point of accidents. Yeah, so this is Visakhapatnam. We know LG Polymers and what happened. So in not just in Dahej, in several places, what we've heard is that it's full of migrant workers. These factories are full of migrant workers. And if there is an accident and we hear that 10 people have died, often the villagers tell us that actually it would have been 15. The 5 of them would have been migrant workers. They just dump their body in the nearby forest or shrubbery or, in a marsh and just don't count them because they're migrant workers. And anyway, we don't have migrant worker data in this country, as the COVID crisis taught us. So we're talking of, I haven't put those photos because I was worried I'm running out of time. But every time there's this is in Visakhapatnam, but every time it's in Kadalur, every time it is in Dahej, every time it is in Manali, in Tamil Nadu, what's happening is that the standing crops are affected. For example, 30,000 hectares of standing crop was finished when Yashaswini in Dahej had a burst. And that burst story is so amazing because they had 2 tanks, one with chemical A, one with chemical B. Tankers came in to replenish stocks. Tanker A, tanker with chemical A, put it in tanker B. Tanker, they swapped it. A few hours later, both tanks burst. Villages had to be evacuated. Standing crop died. A NERI report, right, which is based in Nagpur. A report of theirs when they went to Kadalur to Sipcot, they said that that region had 2,000 more likelihood of cancer than a normal place. Okay, so that's what plastic is doing. This is plastic. This is not just a chemical. These are the chemicals that are going into the plastic. My urge here is please do not consider plastic pollution when you see the plastic lying in a river. This is plastic pollution. And we need to look at the cumulative impact of plastic pollution and not what is wrongly called end of life plastic pollution, because there is no end of life for plastic. Plastic is a forever chemical, right? It will exist forever in our bodies, in our water, in our air. Dahej, Bharat Rasayan, So there are two notorious places which keep having accidents in the Dahej, right? And yeah, I'm done. Actually, I'm done. This is Assam. Oil exploration is not, is not devoid of. So if we keep going upstream, then we look at extraction. This fire burned for 3 months, right? We also saw this. This was just a couple of years ago. Yeah, so this is what we need to do. We need to basically cap petchem and plastics production and consumption. I think that's really the bottom line, that we need to put an end or at least cap it and be really careful about what we use, not use, essential, non-essential, multi, single use, all those grids we need to make. And we need to stop doing the EPR and SUP bans which exist today, because they make no significant difference, right? The industry has claimed that the current SUP ban targets just 2 to 3% of the plastic waste that we find. What is this SUP ban doing? I'm sorry, you did say that it was landmark, but actually it's not landmark, and this is not what we are saying. It's really what the industry has been quoted to say, that it doesn't affect their lives because it only impacts 2 to 3% of plastics. Yeah, so these are what we think needs to be done going forward to make it.
Thank you, Swati, for bringing a very different perspective. I mean, we don't really listen to such discussions too often, at least in the events where plastics are discussed. So let me now invite the next presenter, Dharmesh. So Dharmesh is a very known face in plastic waste management as far as the voice of civil society is concerned. So Dharmesh is going to talk about the gap in policy and practice for plastic waste in India. Let me also quickly introduce Dharmesh before he begins his presentation. So Dharmesh Shah is an India-based public policy analyst and researcher working on the issue of waste, air pollution, biodiversity, and citizen science. He is currently engaged as a senior technical advisor with New Delhi-based Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment, in short, LIFE, where he follows the implementation of India's Biological Diversity Act, air pollution, and plastic policies. He also believes, he also advises the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or GAIA, and the Break Free from Plastic BFFP network on international waste policy spaces like the Basel and the Stockholm Conventions and the ongoing plastic treaty deliberations. He is now based in a hill town of Kumili in Kerala, exploring alternative farming with his partner and 4 dogs. So welcome, Dharmesh. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. So I will refer to some of the talks that have gone before me, speakers. A lot of interesting conversations. I'll be focusing on policy gaps, mainly not looking at what India has, but what India should be aspiring to achieve. And this is in context of the global treaty negotiations that are going on, and what the groups or the civil society groups and governments across the world have been demanding, the trajectory of the policy making in different countries. So one major thing we have with plastics, there is no common agreement on what plastics are and how do we define plastics. So since it was first invented, this material, early 1900s, we still don't have a working definition of plastics. There's a lot of disagreement on what plastics exactly are. And this is at the heart of the plastic crisis, really, because we don't know what we're dealing with. What is that material exactly? As policymakers, this will be our biggest challenge because municipal systems are overwhelmed. We heard it from all the speakers in the morning, from the government, and you will hear later from others as well. Our municipal systems are overwhelmed because municipalities don't know what to do with it. They're just being dumped with millions of tons of plastics and with no way of dealing with different materials that are and new materials are being invented every day. And these are all composites, whatever you want to call it. Different materials are being fused together. The biggest issue will be to make plastic recycling economically viable. Especially most of the plastics that we deal with today are not economically viable to recycle. And that's what EPR is trying to achieve, what he said, the VGF. But we don't know. As we move forward, we'll see what challenges it faces as it operationalizes. To emphasize my point further on the definition of plastics. So currently there are three legally binding definitions of plastics, and these are from different agencies. And the first one is the Convention on the Harmonized Commodity Description of and Coding System, what we shortly referred to as HS code. This is what governs the import and export of plastics globally. And there's a first definition is basically by the under the HS system. The second one is by MARPOL, which is a convention to minimize pollution from ships. And the third one is on the Regional Plan for Marine Litter and Management in Mediterranean 2021. And if you look further down, there is the European Committee on Standardization in 2006. They tried to define plastics. And this is the equivalent of the ISO in European Union. And what they say is the term plastic or plastic do not have a precise meaning because they reflect rather complex formulated systems whose exact composition is generally unknown. And this is what the problem is. Governments, agencies have no way of defining what plastics are. And I would argue that we need to make a clear distinction between plastic as a product and plastic as a material. So far, I think the discussions that we heard, the presentations we heard before me, the idea was to look at plastic as a product, so PET or milk packets. But I think the production starts at the wellhead when it is made into the pellet, and that is the product. That is the material that we have to deal with. It is not about the end of life, but we have to start right from the beginning when the production starts. And this brings me to the next point, and this is like at the heart of the discussion today, the plastic life cycle. Now, and this is the launching pad and to develop some thinking about this, because so far as plastic is concerned, the narrative so far has been on litter. And this was popularized by the United States and global northern countries and the petrochem industry there, which did not want to see plastic production be challenged. So they developed this whole litter narrative. As long as we plug the holes in the system, the leakage is plugged, plastic is not a problem. But we know that there is just way too much. We're making way too much plastics. At some point, we'll have to look at production and look at production caps, because at this stage, none of our municipal systems, as I said earlier, are ready to deal with it. And certainly consumers have a role to play, but we know that consumers have very limited power in this whole larger scheme of things. So we can work towards behavior change. We can work towards other interventions with consumers, but at some point we'll have to address the elephant in the room, which is overproduction. And the life cycle is not, and if you look at that whole complex web, and which is much more than, like Swati's thing was way more complicated, but this is the different stages in the life cycle. But this does not mean that we will be addressing all the different stages in the same priority, because what we see is an overwhelming amount of a disproportionate amount of policies are focused on plastics at the end of its life. So plastic management is what we've been focusing on, and this is globally the problem. It is not just India, but end of life waste management is what policymakers have been focused on so far as plastic is concerned. We need more emphasis on prevention and reduction and upstream management. Now, let's look at the OECD definition, which is on the orange box. Here you see that they tried to define life cycle, and the definition is basically missing a few crucial elements, which we tried to correct, and this is our submission to the OECD. We've introduced the word hazard and full life cycle, including feedstock extraction, and we've replaced the word leakage with release, because as I said earlier, leakage is a very it's a very inappropriate term to deal with plastic pollution. When you say leakage, what we understand is there's a hole in the system and you just need to plug it. And we know this is an overflowing tub. It's not a hole in the system. We're just dumping too much plastic into the environment. And as long as the tap is on, there's no way to clean up the mess. So that's where we need to work on this language and understanding of policies around plastic. And one common complaint, and this I brought this thing just today morning because we've been hearing quite a bit that plastic and waste, the issue is implementation. And it's always about implementation in India, not implementing our laws well. So one at the heart of it, it's a wicked problem. It's a very difficult problem to deal with. But if you look at where India is, where policy making in India is, we are at the cusp of the traditional public administration and the new public management. So here we are seeing taxpayers, consumers, the citizens as consumers, and governments are providing services. And we see that there is not much citizen engagement. And that is at the heart of the whole problem. If you look at cities like Pune or Bangalore, with so much citizen engagement, the waste management has really improved there. And all other cities that are struggling with waste management are basically, they lack the citizen partnership. And we need to, as governance and as governance progresses in India, we need to move towards the public and value management, network governance system as far as waste management is concerned. We cannot be a top-down system anymore. So from a public policy point of view, this is something that we need to bring and into our discussions, into our discussions with the government. We need to push for more public participation. In terms of legislative timeline, people have spoken about it. We have gone through several amendments, from 1999 to 2022, the latest amendment. 2018 was crucial, which Siddharth mentioned in his talk, where we had an amendment which was kind of, with single multi-layered plastics, and it was amended to kind of, there's a lot of work that industry did to kind of push that dilution. And it is a problem. We need to bring that back. The multi-layered plastics have to be relooked. We need a ban, as Sunita ma'am said in the morning, we need a ban on multi-layered plastics. On EPR, we need a robust reporting mechanism. That's the only way. The portal is there, but portal is not that helpful. We need to make the portal more robust. We need to make it more participatory, and we need to have more public accountability. With EPR, as far as EPR goes, so far as EPR in India and most countries actually, it just looks at that last two, the recycling, disposal, and product collection, which is where EPR is limited to. EPR is not just that. EPR is upstream. It's product redesign. It's product looking at what goes into the manufacturing of the product. Because ultimately, if you're recycling or facilitating recycling, there has to be a knowledge of what is exactly going into those plastics, which I'll come to much later. The whole issue of chemicals in plastics, and I'm really glad that the plastic product council, forget the name, sorry, the India Plastic Pact, they're looking at this issue of redesign, which is very, very important, I think, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because we need to redesign some of these things out of our commercial systems. And brings me to the issue of recycling. A lot has been discussed. Report also kind of closely looks at it, but I think even here with recycling, we don't have a clear definition in terms of policy. So we need to, the perception around recycling is very skewed. It's currently everything is loosely passed off as recycling, but there are 4 different kinds. You have the closed loop recycling, which is bottle to bottle, and then there's downcycling, which is the majority of it. What we do now in terms of recycling is downcycling. There's feedstock, which is chemical recycling, and then there's waste to energy, which is the last. But I won't go much into this because it's been discussed. Then it's about production, which again Swati mentioned quite a bit. We're just making too much of it, and the litter narrative, it still holds the center stage. But I think we need to acknowledge the fact that the plastic production is grown exponentially. And this is at the heart of the plastic crisis, which will be discussed quite a bit at the upcoming negotiations around the treaty. Should we put production caps on countries? Because that is a general acknowledgement across the world by different governments that we are just making too much of it. And recycling is not enough. Recycling has its limitations. So far as countries like US goes, only 5% of the plastics are recycled. And they are the biggest consumers of plastics in the world. So we need to kind of really revisit this issue of overproduction. So that kind of brings me some of these specific slides on single-use plastics. I'm looking at, this is Plast India data. Where does India stand vis-a-vis some of these common single-use plastics? If you look at PET, most of it is used for carbonated soft drinks. Water bottle I thought was higher, but it is only 17%. Most of it goes towards carbonated soft drinks, and about 41% goes to films, which is flexible packaging. Same thing with polyethylene. Most of it goes towards flexible packaging. So this is at the heart of it. We have most of the plastics that are made in India, single-use plastics, are for packaging and single-use film and multi-layered plastics. This is a problem plastic, polystyrene especially, and India has banned it in 2022 only for decoration. This is thermocol, as we commonly call it. Most countries have banned it completely. We need a major legislation to kind of phase this out, because this has no post-consumer recycling value, and this is this is a major polluter in oceans. So we need to have some policies to phase this out. It's not very difficult. We have alternatives for packaging white goods. Most of it goes towards appliance packaging, as you see it. And last part of this whole talk, I'll just want to focus a bit on chemicals in plastics. And when we talk about circular economy, this is our biggest hurdle, because if you're talking about recycling plastics, these are the list of chemicals. These are chemical families. Okay, these are not the complete list. We use about 10,000 chemicals in plastic manufacturing as we know it today, and most of them we don't even know what the health impacts are. About a quarter of them are substances of concern, which means that they have known or documented or suspected human health impacts. And if you look at this, the biggest concern here is the flame retardants. And India manufactures about 15,000 tons per year. And flame retardants are very, very toxic, especially if they're brominated. And this has been a subject of discussion at the Stockholm Convention, where they have already banned 3 kinds of flame retardants because of their neurotoxicity and cancer-causing abilities. So we need to look at what we're putting into our plastics, because when we talk about circular economy, we need to be concerned about the poisoning of the circular economy. We cannot have a clean circular economy if we have these chemicals subject of discussion with the industry. We need more transparency and reporting. What exactly goes into our plastics? Because we don't want to eat our food in plastics that contain these chemicals. It does leach, and there's global studies that show that these plastic chemicals leach into food products. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just in terms of policy gaps, I think this is last slide. We need to decouple the plastic from waste narrative. It is not waste issue alone. It has to be throughout life cycle. We need to have intervention throughout life cycle of plastics. We need to challenge the leakage narrative, as I mentioned earlier. We need to end false, or at least reconsider end of pipeline solutions like waste to energy, chemical recycling. These are not plastic to roads, for instance. It is not the same as recycling. We need to really kind of decide what recycling really is. My point on chemicals in health, plastic poisoning the circular economy, we need to know what chemicals are being used in plastics. There has to be a transparency reporting system by the industry. And we need to expand the scope of EPR. Production caps is a subject of debate. And hopefully the ongoing treaty negotiations will have some positive outcomes. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dharmesh. Really insightful. Let me now invite the next speaker, Mayur. So Mayur is currently the president of Association of Compostable Products in India, and he's going to talk about compostable and biodegradable plastics, opportunities and threats. But before I allow him to speak, let me just quickly introduce him to all of you. Mayur is a social entrepreneur with a cause to reduce carbon footprints and provide sustainable solutions to the society by enhancing pro-environmental products. Mayur Jain is an MBA from Pune who started his first venture, Excel Polymer Industries, in 2006, which involved plastic recycling, and later in 2013 founded a company called Pashwa Polyimpex, which is into manufacturing of compostable products. He is also the current president of ACPOI, Association of Compostable Products in India, a pan-India association of certified compostable product manufacturers and RM suppliers, which is working closely with Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Central Pollution Control Board, State Pollution Control Boards for eradication of plastic problems and SUP ban implementation, along with making way for biopolymer-based sustainable and alternative products in India. Welcome, Mayur. The floor is now yours.
Distinguished fellow speakers, CSE team, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure to share the dais with such wonderful people and trial fellow speakers. As you can see, I am representing an ensemble of industrialists who are into manufacturing of compostable products in India. So this is our association. I'll give a brief intro of my association, what we do, so that it will be a lucrative session for all of us. So we are basically CPCB certified manufacturers who are making products as per ISO 17088, the standard which has been developed and allowed by the Indian government and monitored by Central Pollution Control Board. So three kind of categories. So we have the members about, there's the manufacturers and marketers of composite raw material. There's manufacturers of products, and there are also the machinery suppliers. So the aim of this association is to create awareness and implement and help government and the authorities to implement the single-use plastic ban. And also, very importantly, as we were discussing in today's session, also, like what if the SUP ban is implemented in full force? What about the MSME? If they would be out of work and a lot of hassles attached to it. So we also handhold the existing plant and machineries of MSME to convert them into manufacturers of compostable products. So that is one area we address the MSME problem, as we were discussing in the morning session. So as you know, that a 3-stage ban was implied in India, and now a more robust way is coming in December this year. So why this problem? I mean, everybody knows about it. That 40%, 60% of the manufactured plastic in India ultimately ends up in the landfills. So that's the reason. I'm sure everybody knows about it, so I'm not going to dwell much into it. So there are a lot of alternatives when we talk about ban. I'm specifically talking about single-use plastic ban. So when we talk about ban, as she was mentioning earlier, my session, that there has to be some viable and alternatives so that the ban is implemented in a very successful manner. So if we see the kind of alternatives are available in the market, there are like glass products, paper products, metal products, cloth products, wooden products, and biocompostable products. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So this is the life cycle of the biocompostable product. So at the end of it, if we go by the standard 17088, at the end of it, it gives out CO2, water, and biomass. So assimilation to the soil while enriching it comes from nature, goes back to nature. This is our mantra for this product which we are talking about. Let me just put a disclaimer that there are a lot of biodegradable and compostable products in the market, but what we are talking about specifically is 17088 standard, which has been regularized by the government of India and monitored by Central Pollution Control Board. So we are only talking about 17088. So this is the acceptance of compostable options, and these are the parameters, and these are the study researches we have done, why they have been accepted in the market, and what's the cause of it. So we work with various on the various diversions and directions with state governments, with the central government, MOEF primarily. We've been working very closely with government, MOEF, to churn out how we can help in successful implementation of single-use plastic in pan-India, and by creating awareness. Then this is very interesting in indigenous development. We have been working with DRDO, the government organization, Defense Research Development Organization. We have been very successfully now very close to commercialize the production of compostable products in India. So that one way we can make raw material indigenous. And with a lot of state pollution control boards and state authorities to the district levels also, we are creating these awareness camps, and we are providing the infrastructure for people to come and join this industry and creating awareness. State level, central level, all the levels. So you can see Mr. Amit Love there also with us. So this is our association. We're creating awareness. We are conducting seminars, international seminars, and Indian seminars, and that's why we are being successfully doing this a little while. So I'm talking about a little bit about now the global perspective of acceptance and this product, how it has been accepted and what impact is it making. There's a very interesting research by Capgemini on sustainability and changing consumer behavior, which talks about 79% of the consumer are changing their purchase preference based on social responsibility, inclusiveness, or environmental impact. 50% of the consumers and 57% in the age group bracket of 18 to 24 year of age have switched to the lesser known brands because they were more sustainable. More than half of the consumer, precisely 52%, says that they share an emotional connect with products or organizers that are perceived as sustainable. So this is the that earlier also was talking about that there's a research where people are ready to pay more if the product is eco-friendly or the less plastic is being used. So this is an example which validated that comment. I'll talk about some of the international companies and big brands who are committed to more sustainable packaging goals in future. Delphine Vigor-Hovase, who's a global brand president of L'Oréal Paris, she's committed that by 2025, 100% of their packaging would be refillable, reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And by 2030, that is like 7 years from now, it is going to be 100% of the plastic used in their packaging would be either from recyclable or bio sources. They will reach 50% of their goal in the year 2025. The top opportunities in the plastic alternative packaging market segment would be in the segment of starch-based plastic segment, which will be again like $941.8 million of the global annual sales by 2025. This is data published by a business company. So this was the global perspective of the commitment of the corporates. Now, if we go for Indian perspective, companies like Bacardi, Marico, Essex, HUL, Nestle India, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Parle will be moving to 100% recyclable packaging by 2025, helping towards a sustainable future of the packaging industry. Companies like ITC would aim to have 100% of their packaging in reusable, recyclable, or compostable in the next decade. So Indian bioplastic market is like most likely to grow at the rate of 28.4% CAGR during the next few years. The global bioplastic market is also increasing and growing. The 40% capital market capturing is valued around $324 billion. So with a lot of all product have its own merits, demerits. So I'm going to give a small SWOT analysis of compostable products, compostable plastics. So the first, as we all are positive in approach, I'll talk about strength first. So like this is the product, the ISO 17088 standard is the standard which talks about end of life solution for any product which falls in the category. So basic rule of going back to natures and convert 100% into natural products is in limited time. So the time frame study has been done in the lab test, and that is why we aim for that. So also one more very big strength of this technology in this particular standard is you can use your existing plant and machineries. I mean, I'm talking about the MSME, which are using currently using those machineries for making regular and conventional plastic. They can use the same plant and machineries to manufacture these products. Scalability, globally 20 million metric tons every year is already is used in the market, and the capacity is increasing. So when we talk about alternatives, it should be called an alternative which has a scalability and it has a commercial viability also. So that's one strength more. Accepted globally as most promising alternative to SUP. So when we are banning something, so the acceptance worldwide for this particular standard is more. Then there are a few weaknesses attached to it, which I'm going to address. Limitation is in functional packaging application that is required barrier property. So the product, if we make a packaging out of it, it has some barrier property limitations, like because it has a shelf life to it, and the materials start deteriorating after some time. So the barrier properties are slightly lesser, and that is a challenge. And cost is high in comparison to plastic, obviously, because the material is derived from bio-based material. The raw material is bio-based, so the cost is slightly high. But we all are working on it. I'll come in the next slides. I'll cover up how we can overcome the cost and everything. Awareness is limited to certain sections. Yes, the product is new. The whole industry is new, so the awareness about this particular product is limited. So that's why people are not so much aware, and that's why they're not using so much. Policies to replace plastic has still not been percolated into smaller towns. So if you go to smaller towns, they are slightly more confused on policy plastic and how they are going to be replacing existing plastic by the allowed by the government, the plastic which is allowed by the government, which is standard 17088. So that's another aspect which we have to work on. So as in many of the previous submissions, we have seen that there are some threats attached to it. So we have acknowledged and we have noticed few threats, and also by not only noticing, we are working on it to eradicate all those threats and converting them into the positives. So firstly, like as many people have mentioned, that labeling is very important. And if you don't label them properly, it often may be confused and misguided and misjudged by a fake products like oxo biodegradable, and there are a lot of other greenwash products, so which claim to be eco-friendly and all that. So labeling has to be very prim and proper, so that there's a clear demarcation, disintegration, and there's a proper understanding of what is exactly allowed in India in terms of which standard and what product. So lack of regulation and enforcement in many countries. So if you go in certain parts of the world, the regulation is not so. There is in province wise, like in this province it is allowed, and in this province plastic is not allowed. So it is little half-cooked sort of a dish. So we have to be really spot on with that if you want to create a universal robust policy. So another threat is a price gap between the conventional plastic and compostable plastic is so much that there's always a threat of duplicacy, and there's a chances of malpractices that are attached to it. So there are opportunities with the negative. There's a positive. So there's opportunities which I'm going to talk about. There's a developments which is happening all over the world. We are in touch with European bioplastics. We are in touch with Australian bioplastic associations and various other bioplastic associations all over the world. And there's constant push which has been given to this particular product range, so that we come up as a very efficient and more robust and more economical sort of alternatives. So new polymer innovation, I'll just talk about few new inventions like PHA, PBS, PEF. These new compostable plastic address most of the current problems which you're facing right now, including the barrier properties problem. Natural or bio-based feedstock is abundant. Newer technologies are involved to use natural bio resources. So wherever what is available, so we are using different type of crops to to make the raw material out of it. So earlier it was limited to few of the crops like cassava, cornstarch, sugarcane, and all that. So now newer, more options are available, and we are working on that. So. And also huge global investment coming up in the sector by companies called CG Biomer, Terimar, and also this is not mentioned in my presentation, but Reliance Industries Limited. You will be happy to know that Reliance is now coming in biopolymer, and in December their pilot project is being launched. So they have not left this one also. Yeah. So. Citizen drive towards green packaging across all over India is also pushing our agenda towards greener alternatives. So there was a recent study which has been developed, which was conducted in CSAT 174 study, that antifungal bioplastic films developed based on PLA, polybutyrene, PBAT. So if the bread is kept in that particular packaging, the kind of longevity and the kind of shelf life for the bread has increased. So it is very good, and there's a property to it that it increases the shelf life of the food content in it. I'll just wrap up. Thanks, Sadan, for reminder. Yeah, so pretty much compostable polymers are also appealing material for biomedical applications due to their unique physiological, chemical, biological degrading features. They help in reducing greenhouse gas emission and fossil fuel resource depletion. And Italian company BioOn is pioneering it. So there are a lot of developments which are going on. There are a lot of products which we've already made and are available in the market, and we're working on a few more. So this is one slide which shows all the alternatives of SUP ban items we have made from the compostable product raw material. So yeah, this is my coordinate. If anybody wants any help on handholding from a regular conventional plastic company to switch on to compostable, we are always there to help support. Thank you so much. I would like to especially mention Mr. Aton and Siddharth for putting up such a lovely show and calling all of us. Thank you so much. This is a lovely show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayur, to discuss this much needed issue around compostable and biodegradable plastic. We got a lot of clarity, but we do need a lot of initiatives to manage them. So the next speaker is Harshad Wade. So Harshad is basically the director of Swachh Pune, and you might be wondering what Swachh Pune is. Swachh Pune is the largest cooperative of informal sector, which is practically running the entire waste management show in the city of Pune, which is a city of 3 million plus population. So Harshad is going to talk about the informal sector in plastic waste management. And let me also quickly introduce Harshad before he speaks. He is currently the director of Swachh Pune, India's first autonomous cooperative of informal waste pickers, whose 3,500 waste pickers members provide waste collection and management services to over 8 lakh properties in Pune. He holds a master's degree in law from the National Law School of India University. A lawyer by training, he has been a member of the central government's drafting committee for finalizing the solid waste management rule 2016 and plastic waste management rule 2016. He also serves as general secretary of the Kagaj Kaj Patra Kastakari Panchayat, a trade union of informal waste pickers and itinerant scrap buyers in Pune, which strives to empower and enhance livelihood of the waste pickers in Pune. Welcome, Harshad, and over to you.
I have the 12 minutes? Sure. Okay. Thank you, Atin, for a very generous introduction. Some of it is dated now, but thank you very much. It's always very stressful to speak after so many articulate speakers. Even more stressful when it's lunchtime and we are running a little late. I'll try and be as short as possible, although it's absolutely not possible, but I'll try. We've heard about the informal waste pickers and the informal recycling sector all day today. So I don't want to get into too many of those details because I understand this is a discerning audience and you already know quite a bit of it. So I won't gloss over it, but I'll just cover some of those points and move on. What are waste pickers? We know that they are the itinerant, informal, they're collecting waste from the streets, garbage dumps, landfills, wherever they can find the waste, they're sending it. They're either picking it, buying it, or they are bartering for it. And they are putting it into the informal scrap trade, which consists of scrap traders and so on and so forth. As Saloni pointed out right in the beginning, there is no real good data on how many waste pickers or informal sector participants there are. We've already seen 4, 5 numbers. I'll just add 3 more. The WIGO, which is the Women in Informal Employment Globalizing and Organizing, says there might be about 22 lakh odd waste pickers and informal sector participants in the country. एक World Bank का पुराना घिसा पिटा number है 1 to 3% of the urban working population is engaged in this sector. That puts us somewhere around 15 to 50 lakhs. The Alliance of Indian Waste Pickers says 45 to 50 lakhs. I think we just want to say ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा है. Maybe we feel will be more powerful that way. But if you really look at what the issue is, the Kagat Kaj Patra Kastakari Panchayat, which is a trade union based in Pune for the last 30 years, has a membership of about 10,000 active waste pickers that we are in touch with every single year. We still don't know what the true number of waste pickers in Pune is, because we estimate at least 25, being charitable to ourselves, that at least 25% of waste pickers are still not registered with us. We are not able to find them. They're in the middle of the night. They don't want to be found. They don't want to be, they don't want to interact. They don't know what their occupation is, so on and so forth. And that's really where the gap between solid waste management, policy making, and the informal sector is the sector does not want to be found. They don't want to talk. And there are many reasons for it. It's not as if they're doing things illegally, but it's the perception of what the sector is and what the participants are doing that really makes all the difference in the world. Looking at the socioeconomic status, this is very specific to Pune. We found that the income can range from 5 to 15,000. After integration within our Swatch model, there are waste pickers who make 30,000 to 40,000 rupees per month as well. They've moved from walking on the streets to having their own motorized transport, so on and so forth. Most of them are women. Again, very specific to Pune. It differs from region to region. What does not change, however, everywhere in India at least, is that all of them, or a large majority, hail from the backward castes. With respect to children in 1993 versus 2018, I'm saying 18 because in 2020 the situation changed a little bit with the pandemic. In 2018, we found only 0.5% of the women were bringing their children at work. They were not bringing the children to work with them. They were bringing the children because they had no option and the children had nowhere to go. There were no daycare centers, so on and so forth. This is a difference of, say, it was 30% 30 years ago and it's now 0.5%. This is because they're more organized, they talk to each other, they've been able to access better social welfare facilities and social security from the Pune Municipal Corporation. Their work is precarious. There are issues with respect to their health, dignity because of the perception, as well as because of the kind of work that they do. Access to waste is considered by most informal sector participants as their primary mode of livelihood. Their access to waste is access to livelihood. Once you take away the waste, they have nothing to live with. And that is really what puts their life, what makes their livelihoods extremely precarious. Always in conflict, whether it's scrap traders. I mean, it's great that all the way up to the government of India and even at the international level, organizations and governments are recognizing the importance of the informal recycling sector. Yet on the ground, they remain in conflict because the municipal worker and the waste picker go to the same place because they don't have authorized spaces to work out of, so on and so forth. So we need to kind of change that scenario as we go ahead. And like has been said, throughout the day-to-day, they are the source of a majority of the recycling that happens in India. Now, they're usually seen as weak, people in need of support, people who need to be propped up. And while some of it is true, I think the reality is that they're poor and they're from marginalized castes. And that's really about it. They're extremely resilient, they're extremely flexible and extremely innovative, and have made sure that despite little to no external support or funding, they've been able to prop up most of the recycling industry in the country for the last 20 to 30 years. Now, the question is, as again Saloni said very smartly, is that the question is that now that there is some focus on the sector, are we going to help this sector grow further, or are we going to replace them? Is the new money that's going to come in really going to crowd them out, or is it going to support them and ensure that they do better? And integrating them is really, so we say involve, CSE says involve, we say integrate, tomato, I guess, is really the critical way of taking it forward. And I don't want to talk about my organization a lot, but I will give it as an example of what integrating the informal sector means. Now, all of you know this is how a typical solid waste management system looks like. You have generators, you have the municipality coming and picking up mixed dry waste, which means recyclable and non-recyclable together, and sanitary waste in it. And then you have wet waste separate. It enters the municipal system, and from various points, it's the informal sector, either from the household or from the collection, transportation, transfer, processing, disposal points, removes it and puts it back into the scrap shops, which then enters the informal sector, recycling sector, which is not only the waste pickers who do this transfer, but the scrap shops, the aggregators, the pre-processors, and the recyclers. As you go up the chain, right at the end, you will find formal entities recycling. And as you go down the chain, most of them exist in informality. This is the system in Pune. It's a slight modification. It's the fact that the waste pickers who were all along the chain picking up waste from the streets to the landfills are now essentially collecting waste from the doorstep. And as they do that, you see that the fractions get broken up. It's horribly complicated, right? They get broken up into recyclable waste, directly going from households to waste pickers into the scrap shop. And what enters the municipal system is essentially, hopefully, non-recyclable dry waste, separate from wet waste and separate from sanitary waste in many parts of the city today. And this essentially ensures that the recyclable waste does not have to go from here all the way to here before it enters the informal scrap trade. And this ensures that The quality of recyclable waste is higher. Number of people who can participate are more. They have better and cleaner and more dignified access to waste. They're not in containers. They're in five-star hotels, and they're in middle-class houses, and they're in slums, picking up waste directly from the source. They're now able to provide a service of waste collection and charge a user fee for it, which also means that in case there is a reduction in the value of recyclables because of plastic bans or whatever, they still have a sustainable source of livelihood, which is the user fees they charge for collecting the waste. They've, instead of informal, invisible recycling agents, they've become service providers. And that, even if the Swatch model stops, it doesn't really matter, right? There's 4,000, almost 4,000 waste pickers who are providing the collection service. Every single politician, administrator will have to integrate them into the system come what may. And that is the real change that has happened. Because of this, there's almost 200 tons of waste that is recycled by the waste pickers directly. The city does not have to spend anything for it, right? The waste pickers pick from my home, they put it into scrap shop, it goes for recycling, and just this diversion saves the city about 21 crores per annum. Now we've looked at a lot of numbers, and that's about all I'm going to say about that. We've looked at the numbers all day today, and again, like I said, I seem to be repeating you many times. We'll differ on the numbers, perhaps. Aap kuch bolenge, main kuch bolenge, but this is based on what we have done in Pune. It seems like the Helen MacArthur Foundation in 2016 said that the global recycling rate for plastics is somewhere around 14 to 16%. The Greenpeace organization just released a report last year. This year, actually, that the US recycling rates are closer to 5% for plastics. The report says it's about 12.3% based on the data that's coming from the States. Government of India says 60%, but we all can assume it's absolutely for rigid plastics and PET and not for anything else. Over the last 1 year, for a period of 4 months, we've done a deep dive waste characterization study looking at 10,000 generators, the households, 10,000 citizens, 2,500 households generating waste. We've gone through 16 tons of waste, sorted it into 75 different categories, weighed all of it across 7 days to eliminate day-wise whatever, and come up with what is the kind of waste that's being generated, how are the waste pickers handling it, what are they sending for recycling, what is the value that they get out of it. Now, mind you, this is only for residential waste because there's no way to really get a great sample for commercial waste. Every shop and everything is different. So this is specific to residential waste. What we found is, a very consistent figure over the last 7 years, that around 76% is organic waste. It was about 74% 6 years ago. It's really a small variation. Again, paper and plastic are both 8%. The same as what it was in 2015 when we last did the waste characterization study. I don't know why, I'm just telling you the numbers. I'm not a scientist that way. When you look at the dry waste component of it, 33% is paper, 31% is plastic, 12% is sanitary. These are the 3 big categories that we found. What we did find is the amount of this waste that is being recovered and sent for recycling by waste pickers. After that, there are rejects that will absolutely happen. But this is the quantum that the waste pickers are sending out. And 37% of the plastic is being recovered by waste pickers and sent into recycling, which is lesser than the 46% of paper that they're sending. Now, this data has been broken up into around 30 odd categories of polymers. We kind of ran out of categories. We didn't understand them beyond a point, but at least the ones that we could, and we had the National Chemical Laboratory graduate students, kind of doctoral students helping us out to figure it out. There's 30 different categories in which it is broken up. And what we found is that paper waste seems still to be the most abundant type of waste that's recycled by waste pickers, followed by plastics. That's not to say that the income that they get from paper is more than the income from plastics. Is somewhere, it varies from 40% to 60% of their income from the sale of waste. But paper, plastic, and glass, these are the highest amounts of recycled materials by the informal sector in Pune, accounting for about 87% of the recycling that happens. Now, we also try to look at, like I said, we've done the categorization into 30 different types of plastics, but we've also clubbed them together into the EPR categories, the 4 categories that we have. And these are the generation rates for Pune, the current recovery rate, and then what are the collection rates that the EPR mandate is saying, sorry, not the collection, the recycling rates that the EPR mandate is saying going ahead from 24, 25. In the rigid categories, which would be PET, PS, PP, PET, PS, HDP, I guess, the hard plastics. The current recycling rate by the waste pickers in Pune is about 69%. and the industry is required to do 50% in 24-25, and then go up to 80% in 27-28, I guess, over the next 5 years. The sector is already kind of doing it. There's not, I don't know what else is required to be done over here. When we go to the flexible plastics category, though, it's about 22%. Again, compared to the 30% that they have to start doing 2 years from now. It's really in the multi-material category, which is the metallized multi-layered plastic or Tetra Pak, depending on what various cases say in the near future, whether it falls into this category or not. It's really the multi-material that is bonded together that is not going into recycling. The number here is 8%, but I'll also talk about EPR-based collection and mechanical recycling system that we've set up in Pune that has changed this 8% to an effective recycling rate of 18%. So we've added about 10%, but that's the most that we've been able to do with a lot of work also. The fun figure here is the compostable plastic one is showing 0 because it's in ton, it's a very small number, but 68% of it was going into recycling. We have no industrial composting facility, which means most of it was not recognized as being compostable or biodegradable, and was therefore being sent out with the other flexible plastics that were going for recycling. Yeah, that's it. Oh, okay, so I'll just show you the 1 minute for the last slide that is there. Like I said in the beginning, informality is really, it's really by default. It's not necessarily a conscious choice. As long as the margins are very small within the sector, cheap virgin plastic is easily available. EPR systems are not focused on supporting the sector as it is, we're going to end up moving towards a Western style centralized waste collection system. And this is really because the money is not going into supporting the sector as it is. And what is it that one would want from the informal sectors? I'm not a spokesperson for them, but this is what I think would be necessary. Look at preserving the existing livelihoods. There are anywhere between 15 lakh to 50 lakh people doing this work. We have to identify them, register them, and integrate them into the formal solid waste management systems also, and not just into recycling, because recycling, I don't know, might die, might reduce, might become too centralized. But the best way to get permanent long-term security is to give them, integrate them into formal solid waste management systems, irrespective of where they are on the spectrum. They should be given access to social welfare and social security. One very critical thing, if we do want to help the sector, we need to provide them with decentralized spaces. The MRFs and the co-processing units and the RDF facilities and the gasification and incineration all get municipal spaces, and they get a tipping fee to make that work. So why are we not doing the same for the informal recycling sector that's doing most of our recycling work? Give them space, give them money, and that's where the EPR could actually be focused on, something similar to what, say, UNDP was doing. And EPR is a problem. In perspective, as she says, but also on the ground, it has not a single mention of the informal recycling sector, not of waste pickers, not of scrap traders, nothing at all. It will end up replacing the existing system if we don't kind of focus it on the informal sector. Two last things. Taxation policies need to be changed. It's there in the last year's report on plastics that I just read. It will never allow the informal sector to become formalized or to provide any of the things that we want to provide for them. One last thing. There has been a very long-standing tendency of the polymer industry and the plastic producers to say, "Ye waste pickers ke liye acha hai. This is good for the waste pickers, so bring more plastic." In ongoing interaction with the waste pickers of Pune, the waste pickers are saying, "We don't care about plastics. You have to understand. We care about security. We care about dignity. We care about education. Give us those. Take your plastic away. Stop plastic production. Perfectly fine. Come up with alternative solutions. Train us how to do composting and biogas. We'll do that work. We want livelihoods. We don't want plastic." And that is really the takeaway, where the informal sector can work with the environmental groups across the world to start saying, "Stop shooting from our shoulders." Right? This is not for us. This is for you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Harsha. And it's terrible to ask someone to stop the presentation while people are kind of mesmerized with the delivery. So just, we are cutting into the lunchtime. We have already cut into the lunchtime. So our next presenter is Pranshu, my old friend. So Pranshu is currently the founder and head of Karo Sambhav. He doesn't need any introduction from me. And he's going to talk about the role of producer responsibility organizations of PROs in plastic recycling, challenges and agenda. Before I ask him to speak, let me quickly introduce Pranshu to all of you. Pranshu Singhal is the founder of Karo Sambhav, an organization that works on improving recycling and waste management by helping mostly informal workforce engaged in to have access to more formal mechanism. He's also winner of the 12th Social Entrepreneur of the Year award. Prior to Karashambhav, Pransu was the director, digital learning strategy in the worldwide education team for Microsoft. For 3 years, he had worked with Nokia as head sustainability for 11 years and was based in Finland, Singapore, and India. He was recently conferred the Social Entrepreneur of the Year 2021 India by Chiva Foundation, a sister organization of WEF, and a jubilant. So sorry, I messed it up. And Jubilant Bhatia Foundation. He is an Aspen Fellow, Ashoka Fellow, and 7 Gurukul Fellow, and an Aspire Circle Fellow. Pransu has a master's in environmental management and policy from International Institute of Industrial Environmental Economics, Sweden. Thank you, Pransu. Over to you.
Hi, greetings everyone. And amazed by the presentations that have happened. Actually, some mind-blowing data sets, especially from you. So how to look at the the total lifespan. I think every single presentation has been eye-opening. So fantastic session, I think. So I have taken the liberty of changing it from plastics to circularity. I will go. First, I was thinking, are we really talking of just plastics packaging here, or are we talking of plastics in totality? And if we are talking plastics in totality, then e-waste, which is one of our biggest areas of work, is 60% plastics. And there are no answers to a lot of those things. So I kept it a little bit broader. PRO, and then the suggested topic for me was on PROs, which has become a, how do I say, in India it's a bit abused term, actually highly abused term. What PROs should have been and what they are is very far from an idealistic PRO. So I mean, you all understand circular economy. I will not go into these details, but there are 3 aspects as I look, and it has come up in dialogues of multiple speakers. We are talking of 3 types of interventions if we are trying to bring in change. The first is design stage interventions, which is all about can I put better materials? Can I change materials? How do I design my product from a recycling point of view, disassembly point of view, and so forth. Then we have the business model in itself. Do I sell the product or do I lease it? I can do a lot of interventions and we can fundamentally change those. And then the third is the end of life. This is where the EPR, ideally EPR goes in all the 3 stages, like one of the speakers also already mentioned. But if I look at the way the Indian regulations are written at this point in time, they are only focusing on end of life. Even the slight mention on design has been eliminated from the latest version of the regulation, which I find actually fundamentally flawed, because so I'm a student of Thomas Lindquist, who coined the term EPR, and we have been discussing this across countries. And this is a very peculiar case where EPR has been molded to a very tiny space, forged to get into a very tiny space. So if I were to talk of PROs, essentially, any PRO essentially comes and acts in the last stage. It has generally very little to do because design interventions are required to work very closely with brands, and that space is not provided by the brands to a PRO. If I look at global PROs, even the business model intervention is generally a space not allowed to a PRO. So PRO essentially focuses on 3 things. First is, how do I collect better? And that's the whole and sole purpose, or the very fundamental being why PROs do exist. So how do I bring brands to collaborate? How do they come on a common platform? And how do I ensure collection happens at a scale at which it has not happened? And that would mean a lot of things, including integration of informal sector at scale, and a lot of other things. I'll talk about them as we go ahead. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, are we recycling better? And recycling better is the point here, not recycling. So recycling has happened in all different forms. We have called sometimes anything as recycling. We continue to call anything as recycling still today. So are we moving up the ladder? And if I were to quote Thomas, his idea always used to be, are we going better each and every day instead of, so not the best, but are we at least improving on a daily basis? And so PROs do have a role in keeping a very strong eye on what is happening and are we improving the recycling quotient. And then the third, which is kind of a new leg, it has always been present but not spoken much, kind of forgotten, is how do we utilize the recyclates? So post-recycling, what is happening? happening? Are we able to plug in the gaps? Are the materials going back into the products? And traditionally, we have counted downcycling as recycling. At times, utilization of secondary materials is mostly downcycling in our, at least, mindset. Here we are talking, can I use plastics from a printer to create new plastics or new mobile phones? So something equivalent, because it's highly engineered. A lot of work is already gone. Do I need to recreate this material, or can I reuse it endlessly? So if I were to go into specifics of what these three things mean, the first is how do collection systems come into being? And this is by setting up a whole range of channels. The role of a PRO for me has always been, it's a common platform for collaboration. Something like what PACT is doing in terms of packaging, but this is, PROs were essentially planned to be a cooperative of sorts. Ideally a not-for-profit. Indian tax structure makes it very difficult to operate as a not-for-profit. So initially, they took the route of for-profit here, but it has become a very, very challenging space. So I'll talk about all those as I go ahead. But collection systems, all types of, whether it is formal, informal, working with retail, working with the existing distribution networks, all that is the work of a PRO. Today, we see none of this happening, or very little of it happening. If we talk of recycling systems, bringing efficiencies, effectiveness, keeping an eye and allocating the right amount of funds to these spaces, which again is not happening because PRO koi fund nahi milta. So, and again, why nahi milta, I'll come back to that. So sorting, dismantling, recycling, are they having? So for me, a PRO is not just a system integrator, but is also a system auditor. So someone who keeps an eye, publishes data, becomes the right arm of the government in terms of enforcement, that I am the provider of all data sets, very openly, very transparently. Any single thing that we are doing is available to you for all. So that's the true role of a PRO. And then the secondary material, something which I believe a PRO can do as we go ahead, because if they start keeping an eye, and we are starting to just do this part, if we start keeping a very strong eye on what is happening in recycling, then you can work on secondary material utilization, because it's essentially the same brand, different department in the same brand, but the same brand who's going to use the materials which are coming out of recycling. And then the underlying all this for me is the industry creation part. How do we create an industry out of it? Circular economy, while it is being debated at all levels, but it is not an industry. I mean, can I really call it an industry? We don't know how much money is to be spent. What are the standards? What are the ways of working? What are the wages to be? कुछ भी तो नहीं पता. मतलब सब कुछ जो आपने decide कर लिया वही है. So कोई benchmarks ही नहीं. In some spaces they have started to come, but across forums, whether it is Indian, international, what I'm finding is that complete lack of grassrootedness to the dialogue. And that needs to be fixed. If you don't fix it, we are talking of a vague system which will just keep on floating. So if we have to make progress, we need to define circular economy as an industry in itself, which needs to have, very fixed patterns, ways of working, and so forth. So making it happen, if I were to really go, if PROs are to work in the most efficient manner, the first thing is, how do we bring up this whole idea of viability gap funding? So what is this gap? सब लोग बात करते हैं, but क्या वो 80 पैसे का है? Like today, PET collection recycling is happening. I think the lowest rates I've heard is maybe even 60 paise, even 50 paise per kilogram. क्या हो सकता है 50 पैसे में? कुछ हो सकता है क्या? Seriously, I mean, think about it. A kilogram of PET collection at 50 paise, a kilogram of MLP collection at 2 rupees. I mean, nonsensical numbers at which the whole industry is today operating. So if I were to go, what a PRO does is, first of all, regulate this as an industry driven body, as an industry supported organization. So define what is the cost of going circular, what is this real viability gap funding, and anything which is done below it essentially means कि ये paper पे हो रहा है, असली में तो हो ही नहीं रहा. Bring out the risks, bring out the challenges which exist in this whole space. Today, no one talks about it. It is in some of the circles that they are bought, but we need this space to exist, because tabhi industry banegi. The second thing is, defining what is the EPR fee. Today, and this is, we are working on what global EPR is. It's a group of few students of Thomas who are now starting to work on defining global EPR. And what we are finding is the whole world is on a race to the bottom, because sabse sasta kaun. That is what we are all about. If I want to do it, I will just auction my work, and whosoever is the lowest bidder, not on quality, I will just pick up that lowest quality work, because मेरे को एक piece of paper मिल जाता है for EPR compliance. And we are valuing EPR का वो piece of paper more than livelihoods, more than the environmental impact, more than the social beneficial impact. So if change has to be brought, we need to fundamentally, bring in the idea of what is the right capital which needs to go in. And one of the things that we also did, and we will try to publish it, I'm trying to find good partners in this space, is what is the real cost if I were to load it for a consumer? Chips ka packet ka kitna price badhana padega if I were to say this product is truly circular now. And that money is, believe me, peanuts. We are talking of few paise increase on a 20 rupees chips packet. In case of mobile phone, that number is 15 rupees. How much does it matter? Still, we are not seeing action. Why? So what is the cost of going circular? I believe, PROs who ultimately have all the data sets, it's their job to start publishing these data sets. Make it ultra transparent for everyone to act. Then if, as I was talking about, in, creating level playing fields. Why are we facing this challenge in India where, एक अच्छा system बनना शुरू हुआ था, but उसके बाद सिर्फ collapse ही हो रहा है continuously. हर साल पिछले साल से खराब. It's not कि हर साल पिछले साल से अच्छा, it's हर साल पिछले साल से खराब. That is the motto of the whole industry at this point in time. Sorry, I'm being very, acting angry, but the reality is that. And I don't see it changing to a point that, I was, company का भी नाम हमने तो करो संभव रखा था with all the hope, to a point, where a lot of my team members are becoming hopeless कि ये कभी होगा भी, if we don't bring in the massive changes that are to be brought. So creating that level playing field, which means one company raises the bar for other company. I am doing the right work, I am recognized, and I force. What is happening in our case is because everyone is on a race to the bottom. मेरा सबसे सस्ता हुआ, तुम्हारा कितना हुआ? अरे तुम तो महंगे हो, okay, तुम भी सस्ते हो जाओ. So which means we are continuously killing every single thing that could have been done in the right way. Which essentially means there are no standards. Talks of today, so many software-based solutions, but what are they really doing? Have they solved the problem the way they were tried to solve? Another very big aspect that I see for PRO is supporting enforcement agencies, building their capacity, because this is new. We have been talking to most of the pollution control boards across the country. And one of the biggest challenges I always hear is that data sets available nahi hai, grassroots ki practices pe knowledge nahi hai. And this is very understandable. So that is also a function of a PRO. Even bringing what I call radical transparency in the whole system. Sara ka sara data public domain. Why hide anything? And I'm even requesting, if we have to improve EPR regime in this country, maybe government should put all the data sets that have been submitted by whosoever, including financial data. कि किसने कितना पैसा खर्च करा, उसमें में हो भी सकता है क्या कहाँ? If it goes on public domain, just the deterrence will work. आज की डेट में pollution control board के पास इतना लोड है कि उनको जाके एक audit करना, कहाँ तक करेंगे? We are talking of thousands of organizations. But if we just create a deterrence mechanism, it will solve. And again, so involving all actors. So how do we create ecosystems? But again, coming back to, I can keep on talking a lot. This would all happen in a system where PROs are well defined. Today in our country, I think we would have the highest, अगर मैं e-waste की बात करूँ, plastic waste में तो अब नहीं है, but we have the highest number of PROs. इतने तो किसी पूरे continent में नहीं होते जितने हमारे अकेले देश में हैं. So why did we give them authorization? On what basis? क्या उनकी capabilities है? क्या उनकी understanding है? क्या grassroots पे change ला रहे हैं? And are we monitoring them in an effective way? So I think the scope is immense, but let me not leave it a negative note. I think what has also happened in the last 5 years is a very positive momentum. Conferences like this are testimonial to that. Very positive action at a state pollution control board level. At least the dialogue is happening, and we will find a way. So even at a brand level, I don't want to leave it at a negative note. I am seeing good action. What we need is, if we can give the right signals, then it will move in the right direction. Today, those signals are all mixed up, and we are only after what we call a paper-based compliance. And if that is there, we are all happy. That gives us great numbers, but वो numbers सबको पता है खोपते. Thank you.
Thank you. The last presenter for this session is Dr. K.S. Jayachandran, and my apologies to you, sir, for keeping you waiting for so long. Dr. Jayachandran is currently the member secretary and in the Delhi Pollution Control Committee, but that is an additional charge. He is working as a secretary in the Department of Environment and Forest under the government of NCT of Delhi. And we had requested Dr. Jayachandran to talk about implementation of the extended producer responsibility and single-use plastic ban. challenges and agenda. And before I ask him to speak, let me just quickly introduce him. He is a Indian Forest Service cadre officer. He is currently working as Special Secretary, Environment Forest in the government of NCT of Delhi with additional charge of OSD to Chairperson DPCC. The officer is also in charge of the Member Secretary DPCC, a member of Indian Forest Service, and holds a doctoral degree in post-harvest technology from Indian Agricultural Institute, IARI, New Delhi, and PG diploma in environmental law from National Law School of University, Bengaluru. He spent a time as a forester in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh in managing state forest, community forest and protected areas. Then served the Directorate of Forest Education, Government of India, and Eastern Forest Rangers College, Kurseong near Darjeeling, West Bengal, and Central Academy of State Forest Service, Dehradun, building capacity of the forestry professionals and other stakeholders in managing forest, reforesting, devising livelihood environment strategies, mobilizing communities and building institutions for natural resource management. Became a master trainer accredited by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India in the domain of forestry. Since I had opportunity to hear Dr. Jayachandran speak in many forums, he is one of the pioneer in reviving hundreds and thousands of Delhi's water body that we had lost otherwise because of the pollution code. Welcome, Dr. Jayachandran. The floor is now yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. A very bad time to talk. I understand there's so much of hunger, irritation with everyone. But on the good side, that it's a good time to survive also as a speaker, right? So, a very good afternoon to everyone. So, for this topic, so spend some time to prepare a few slides, and I'm going to rush through, not taking much of your time. So I'm going to skip this. We all know the timelines in plastic waste management rules. So these are the key action areas which, as Delhi government, as Delhi Pollution Control Committee, which we have identified as part of a comprehensive action plan. So we are looking into policy issues, institutions, the management issues with related to both plastic waste and littered SUPs, the enforcement thing, the recycling infrastructure, the promotion of alternatives, data collection, monitoring, awareness, and of course, the government being a model employer, how the government is responding to the need of avoiding single-use plastics. So we have these comprehensive actions since the last 12 months. And we got several institutions at the higher level, the middle level, at the district level. We also got our control room and a helpline. And this is where the actual assessment starts here. So this is the assessment of plastic waste in Delhi. CPCB says that 644 tons per day is generated in Delhi. And our own study say that 1000 TPD, which is approximately 10% of the total municipal solid waste generated in Delhi, out of which single-use plastic is 5%. And when we reduce the same percentage with the present municipal solid waste generated in Delhi, presently 11,400 tons per day is the municipal solid waste generation in Delhi, so 10%. So today we have got around 1,100 tons per day, which is generated in Delhi. MCD has started not a very good dashboard that we have forced MCD to kind of start a dashboard which shows daily segregation, daily collection. And we did this, iForest is an organization which did this inventarization back in April, May 2022. So interesting figures. So this is a composition of SUPs which we find in residential, commercial wards and dump sites. So carry bags, easily the most dominant. Plastics, 92%, followed by cutlery items, plastic sticks, and wrapping. This another figure on your left, the bar diagrams, LDPE, MLP, dominant again. And when you see the pink bar, this indicates something larger. When this says that dump site, to the dump site, only LDP and MLB reaches the dump site because there's no value in the informal sector. And when we checked out the shops, the pie diagram on your right, 52% of the shops, almost half the shops in Delhi were still selling single-use plastics, while 20% were selling both, and 28% slowly started selling alternatives to SUPs. This is a study which we did recently, around 600 sampling points, and we tried to find out how deeper is the penetration of alternatives to SUPs. So interesting studies here. Glasses top. So glasses have got alternatives now in the market, followed by spoons, plates, cups, right? And if you look at the other side, alternatives still we don't find balloon sticks, candy sticks, plastic sheets less than 50 microns, wrapping films. So these are the weak spots and the strong points in terms of the penetration of alternatives in the market. So infrastructure, there are around material recovery facilities, there are around 157 locations we got around, which caters to around 250 TPD. Gap analysis, 1100 TPD, 855 TPD is today recycled or co-processed in existing 4 WTE. I understand waste to energy is not the most ideal way to actually recycle plastic, I understand. Still, one of the sites I said, Delhi is full of pipeline solutions. So, I mean, yes, we have WTE. And the remaining gap also, we are successfully managing to process them in future WTE. So, to fill the gap of 247 TPD, we got a plan of 2 more WTE, which would process 400 TPD. So in another, by 2025, we'll be having 5 huge WTEs, which will be recycled, which will be actually burning this plastic waste. And leveraging of funds, yes, I mean, Mahua is also on board. They are also helping us with funds. Registration, EPR registration, 4 categories we all know. I'm not getting into this. The targets we understand. So the last thing, this is the status of application which you have received so far in Delhi. 500 applications PBOs. The PWP is around 400. Regarding biomining, we see these 3 major mountains of garbage. So we got a plan in actually biomining this legacy waste. Today, as things stand, we have finished 21% of the garbage dump site. By March 2024 is the timeline to finish off 100% of the biomining. Enforcement, my talk is on the enforcement. Yes, we got special teams for enforcement, Revenue Department, DPCC, MCD, and this is the data I'm leaving behind the presentation. Now, this is important. I mean, how are we going to promote alternatives to SUPs? So, Delhi government is speaking about an incentive scheme where we give sales-linked incentives, production-linked incentives, as also GST reimbursement. This policy is in the final process of being finalized. And then small initiatives done by various departments like Batan Bandas, awareness campaigns, brand ambassadors, and grievances, huge number of grievances which we receive, and we manage in redressing at least more than 90% of them. And research R&D studies, we have started to look at evaluating various alternatives available in the market. We have just floated this study, and also to suggest a future roadmap. Microplastics, again, we have started a study in Yamuna River and the groundwater in Delhi. The IEC plan, different themes which you are covering. And last 1 year, we have been implementing this IEC plan through various departments. We had this huge plastic vehicle mela in July. And then on an autopilot mode, we build capacities of various departments and students. And also the government of Delhi is pretty on top of the ban by having a self-advisory, as well as there's a complete ban on identified SUP items in the government buildings of Delhi. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So this brings us to the lunch finally. Just because we have lost some time, because we had some excellent speakers on board and the presentation continued for slightly longer than we thought. But it has been extremely meaningful, and I have been constantly monitoring the feedbacks that are being posted by the virtual participants. So they are also excited. So we didn't want to take away the opportunity from them. So we are breaking from lunch. It is just 5 minutes to 2 o'clock. We are just reducing the lunch time by 15 minutes. Earlier, it was supposed to be for 1 hour. So if we can be back here exactly at say 2:40, so that we can start slightly earlier. And then we are also trying to make some rearrangement in the panel discussion, which is going to follow after the lunch, and so that we can manage the lost time as much as possible. So lunch is outside. Please proceed, and please reassemble here by 2:40. Thank you.